Here now to give us our second speech before morning tea this morning to tell us how to beat the top 1% of threats and become among the top 1% of defenders from the information protection group at our platinum sponsor Symantec. Please welcome Nick Savvides.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. That was a great start to the day. I think that was a fantastic talk. Encryption is something that I find very fascinating, and I've been working in this space for a long time. Now, what I'm going to talk about really is the 1% of organisations, both on the defending side and on the attacking side. Now, when we think about the problems that we face as IT security practitioners, we have organisations and teams with people sitting there feeling that they are spending their time firefighting and not getting anything done. Right? We're treading water when it comes to IT security in most organisations. Most teams are under-resourced, underfunded, and don't have the tools or the skills to do what they need to do. And because we spend most of our time firefighting, it leaves us open to attack. Now, many IT security departments feel like these people from Mad Max Fury Road, begging for water. Now, when we think about the IT skills shortage, it's really terrible. We have right now jobs going unfilled and organisations unprotected, and it's not unique to Australia, and it's not something that's going to change overnight. This applies globally. It's predicted by 2020 there'll be 1.5 million IT security roles unfilled. Now in this room there's what, about 700 people? Is that right? I don't know, attending the conference? Yeah, about 700 people. That is about 12% of the entire IT security community in the country is in this room. Right? 12%. It's fascinating, and it's a real problem. The skill shortage is crippling, and it's hard to acquire talent. This is the other problem. Because the jobs are scarce, only the top organisations have the resources to pay for the top people with the skills, and they often don't have the resources to train up their internal people, because as soon as they do, they leave. Right? No one here is running a department that says, I have more money and people that I know what to do with. Right? When was the last time you went to a budget review and said, you know, I'm happy with my team size. Right? I'm working 40 hours a week, right, with a 2-hour lunch break. Doesn't happen. This is a real problem that organisations face today. And the bad guys, of course, know this. So, you might remember this great hacking scene from NCIS, also known as, if you Google it, it's 2 idiots, 1 keyboard. What I find is many IT organisations, many IT security organisations feel like this. They don't have the executive sponsorship within their organisations to run a clear IT security mandate. And you end up with too many fingers in the pie, too many fingers in an incident, too many different groups trying to run IT security with areas unclear in boundaries, in roles and responsibilities. That's an end-user compute problem. I don't know how many times I've heard that in an organisation. Yes, it is an end-user compute problem, but it's a security issue. These things need to be controlled in a manner with a sophisticated IT security program. And as much as we like to say that, yes, this is a solved problem, it isn't. The basics still elude us when it comes to this sort of control. Now, who went to RSA earlier this year in the US? A few hands. This is a photo of the floor plan from the South Hall of all the vendor speakers. I was looking for one for AusCERT, but you didn't have one up on the site for me to steal. So next year, please. It's a floor plan from the South Hall. These are all IT security vendors. So not only do we have problems inside our organisation on who is responsible for security, we have a tremendous problem with the number of vendors and technology options that we have. Or just look at that screen. There were 700 vendors at RSA selling different technology solutions. Some competing, some overlapping, some very unique, some very niche players. Now, that was the South Hall. Here's the North Hall, right, of vendors. And I just want to show you something, and that is there's a central cluster here of the big vendors that about 30% of security spending, vendor security spending, is spent on technologies in this cluster. Now, that means that whole total addressable market, roughly about $200 billion, is being spread rather thinly with all of these players competing for technology, everyone wanting to have a meeting with you. Now, imagine you gave half an hour of your time to every vendor on that list. You're not going to get anything done, right? This is the problem that people face. Where do you make a decision? How do you go and pick the technologies that you're going to use? The bad guys exploit this. And then I hear, I'm going to build my own SOC. Oh, a few people here run SOCs, right? I'm sure. I'm going to run my security operations centre. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go and get funding. I'm going to go and install Hadoop, and I'm going to start doing some big data analytics, and I'm going to collect all my logs, and then wait a minute, I need a SIEM, and I need to start crafting policies. This is hard, and this feeds back to that whole staffing issue. Not only is it a technology problem, it's a people and process problem. How many organisations can afford to run a 24/7 SOC? Most organisations can't. This is why the top 1% of defending organisations can, because they have the resources. But most enterprises are not going to get funding to run a 24/7 operation, let alone maintain it. And it's not just about technology, it's about process and being able to exploit those capabilities that a SOC brings you. The incident response, the incident analysis. And you heard at the start talking about incident response. I'm going to talk about that in a couple of slides, why incident response is something that is fairly poorly done today. The third thing with running a SOC is training. Where do I go to train how to actually run an effective organisation when it's coming to run a SOC? It's very different consideration to running a network operations centre or doing regular security analysis. I need to be able to train people to work in a pressured environment where they're not going to suffer agent fatigue. That is the biggest problem facing most SOCs today, is agent fatigue, because the people are spending their time firefighting, investigating false positives, and they get bored, and they look for the next challenge, and then they leave. And then your SOC doesn't add much value. It is a lot harder than most people think. And I know because we run a SOC, and it's extremely hard for us. And if it's hard for us, it's going to be hard for everybody else. All of this combines to what? Well, it means that the bad guys have got a lot of access into systems, and it means that we get lost, our data breaches are lost. 200 plus days is the average for detection for a data breach occurring. That's a huge amount of time. It's a huge amount of time, 200 plus days. I've taken a Gartner figure, a Ponemon figure, and a Symantec figure, and said it's all about 200 plus. Right? There's like 220 and 250 and whatnot, but we'll just call it an even 200 days. Now, if it takes 200 days to know that a breach has occurred, and that 70% of the time we're notified by external parties, what does this say about the bad guys? We know the bad guys are professionals. We know they are sophisticated. We know that they are well-resourced. This is a big game. The Australian government's report on cybersecurity says that it's costing Australia about $1 billion a year today. cybercrime is a $1 billion problem in Australia with an estimated up to $17 billion impact by 2020. It's a huge problem. Now, what that dollar figure attracts more people onto the bad guys' side. They don't need to get it right every time. They don't need to get it right every time because the attack surface for them is they're not looking at single organisations, they're looking at the entire economy and the entire plethora of organisations that they can compromise. It's a huge incentive to attract more bad guys, and it's driving up a very professional marketplace where I can go and buy O-Day exploits, where people are publicly trading O-Days for $1 million, where I can go and rent my toolkits, right? Where I can go and rent platforms to perform my attacks. The bad guys are well resourced, and they generally work without any fear of being arrested or being caught. The monetisation of cybercrime is a lot easier today than it was 10 years ago. Now, let's have a look at, one of our team members from our incident response team was really nice and sent me some slides, some screenshots of tools. One of the interesting things that I wanted to talk about was the sophistication of campaigns. I just want to talk about email for a second. Email is still one of the biggest vectors coming into an organisation for attacks, right? And for a long time we thought this was a solved problem. But looking at some statistics, we see the number of emails sent in a phishing campaign or whaling campaign or whatever you want to call it now when I'm going after executives has actually come down. Why has it come down? Because the bad guys are better resourced and they better track their targets and they understand what people are doing and what their role is, what their functions are, and send them very, very crafted emails that do not contain malware, that get them onto this chain of events. It's I find this a really fascinating problem that the actual number of incidents per campaign has come down. And when the bad guys don't have those tools, they don't have those capabilities, they outsource them. Now, that's all very well and good, but let's think about this for a second. When we have under-resourced IT security, sophisticated bad guys with plenty of resources, some people believe that this is the worst time to be in IT security. It's the end times, right? So it's a crossover episode. But that's not the case. It's not all doom and gloom. The reality is there are things that we can do. And I'm going to show you now, this is a great site, informationisbeautiful.net, which has some visualizations of data breaches or PII breaches. And I love to use this slide. This is a screenshot I took the other day. These are lovely high-profile attacks that we talk about. But the reality is most of these were due to bad security hygiene or bad OPSEC. Now, we all love, as security practitioners, we love to talk about the really shiny attacks, right? The really cool ones. Hey, that supplier, they had their servers compromised, their code signing key stolen, and their firmware was Trojaned. Their drivers were Trojanized, and then the target downloaded those drivers, updated their system, and now they're Trojanized. Wow, what a cool attack that is. How do I defeat that? The reality is most of these were due to bad hygiene. And I know that it's shocking to say, but just through simple OS patching, app patching, multi-factor auth, server hardening, and endpoint security, will defeat the bulk of these attacks. I mean, the ASD keeps talking about the top 4. The top 4 is still patching. These should be solved problems. We still have a problem with security hygiene. 80% of attacks can simply be defended against by having multi-factor authentication. There should be no excuse for any organisation not to be rolling that out everywhere and not saying, I'm just going to give it to this group of people. Because you know what? The bad guy doesn't care which people are using it. They're going to go for the ones who aren't using it and those vectors that aren't doing it. This is still a big problem. Security hygiene is still a big problem. But the question that's probably coming through, I don't know if the question has come in through, is yet on what about the 1% of attacks you were talking about? Nick, didn't you promise the 1% of attacks, that these shiny attacks, and how we defend against them and how to leapfrog them? Well, I'll get to that in a second. Let's talk about the wetware first. All right? People will always let you down, and they are the front line today. They will always let you down. And we have a tendency in IT to shame people, and I don't like that. I don't like shaming people who make the mistake of clicking on a link or laughing at them because they did that wrong operation. These people are victims. They are targeted and they are victims. And it is disappointing that it happens, but they are the front line, and we need to do more to help our end users. Now, your users should be this happy when you give them a new security tool. Right? Of those 700 tools we were talking about, they should be that happy to get one. No one has ever been this happy looking at a new security tool. When you said to someone, here's a token to help you log in, have they ever looked that happy? Never. But we need to change the way we approach IT security to make it end user friendly. And you heard before about encryption. The reason people are using WhatsApp and iMessage and it's encrypted is because it's easy and they don't need to do anything. This is what we need to do with security. We need to make it easy for the wetware to understand, and we need to do training. And I don't mean training like in the old days. Who here has done compliance training? Workplace harassment, IT security policy awareness training. And how does it work? Get to the end, click, fill out the survey, I'm good for another year. That's another hour of my time I'm never going to get back. We need to change the way we do training and make it interactive, so make it fun and engaging. And the final component is make it everybody's problem. Model from successful OH&S strategies. OH&S has been an amazing transformation in the workplace. Workplaces are safer than they ever have been because its safety has been made everybody's problem. Right? Makes IT security, information security, everybody's problem. Model from those successful OH&S policies. Right? Now, everyone familiar with the Prime Directive from Star Trek? I say that as I'm wearing my Star Trek cufflinks, so extra geeky today. Don't introduce technology to species that are not ready for it. Same thing when it comes to security. Don't go and buy a new tool if you haven't got the basics right. You're not going to have time to run it. Make sure you have, if you're purchasing or utilising or rolling out a new technology, understand the integration of it and what that means for your staff. It's all very well and good to say, we're buying a SIEM. Great, I've collected all my logs. Who is now going to write those rules? Who's going to filter out those incidents when you're spending 38% of your time firefighting? It is so hard, and so many people make bad decisions because of this. Understand the impact on your teams. People are people. You don't want them to suffer from burnout, and you don't want to suffer them from fatigue, and you don't want them to be working when they're tired, when they're working on information security incidents. Right? And of course, do this before you roll it out. Don't go and buy all this stuff or change the way you're going to work before you roll it out. Right? Don't wait for that. Do it up front. Don't do it after the fact. And the final thing that I want to say is assume you will be popped. And this is when we go to talk about incident response. Assume you will be popped. Have an incident response plan. And I don't mean a plan that was written 5 years ago and you pull it out once a year and you go, yes, we have an incident response plan, and put it back. Incident response plans today, most organisations' incident response plans are terrible. Right? They don't understand how to communicate with the public, how to communicate with their peers, how to coordinate between groups inside an organisation. Write an incident response plan, a practical incident response plan, and follow that through. because when that 1% of threats does get through and it does pop your environment, you need to be able to respond to it quickly and recover from it. Train on it. Don't leave it in the cupboard and blow it out once a year and say, yes, I now have an incident response plan. Importantly, respond and recover, but preserve evidence. People can't help you if you've trashed all the evidence. Have a process. Respond and recover, but maintain the evidence. This is absolutely important, key thing to consider. And finally, something that doesn't happen very often is learn from every incident. Ask lots of questions. Document it all. Talk about it. Learn from every incident. Now, with those three things, get the hygiene right, get the basics right, educate your users, make it interesting for those users, and assume that you will be popped. The top 1% of threats are going to be defeated to an extent, right? At least you'll be able to better respond. And I am completely and utterly out of time, so I will. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Fantastic stuff from our platinum sponsor, Symantec. Nick Savvides, thank you so much, Nick. We're now